Welcome back to Mind Hydro. You thought I disappeared. No, I did not. Unfortunately, we've been busy in other areas in my practice. First, I'd like to thank everybody for the incredible feedback that you guys have been giving me and my website and the many reviews I've been getting. I thought that I could start this new series with something very important. You know, one of the topics that get people into the specialty of psychiatry is schizophrenia. But before I touch the subject of schizophrenia, which is the foundation of all the training for many years for psychiatrists, back 100 plus years, I want to tell you something about the brain. Many people ask me, you know, the brain is such a complex mechanism, it's such a complex way of looking at the world. You know, the best way to look at your brain and how it functions and how it's interconnected, and the word is interconnected. For many of you, have you ever seen the tree? If you take a tree and you lift it up, you see this humongous trunk with leaves and at the bottom a diverse root system. That root system is what sustains the tree. It is a source of nutrition, it is a source of water, and it's very diverse. If you were to take the brain, it's almost like the roots of a tree. You know, the tree, if you do damage in one root system, it finds a way to reconnect more roots to keep that tree going. So one of the things about the brain of all organ systems is to maintain us alive. And in order for us to exist, we have to have a redundancy system. What does redundancy mean? Imagine that your brain is a network, just like the roots of a tree. If one part's failed, the other kicks in. So that's what redundancy is. All the brain is interconnected. There are all kinds of pathways that touch one another. So people ask me, well, why is depression very like anxiety? I mean, why when you have depression you have anxiety? Or why when you have physical pain you have depression? And why when you get intoxicated with drug it impacts another part of your brain? Because the secret here is called redundancy. If you can visualize your brain as a network of all these networks of neurons that talk to each other and they're in a perfect balance. For example, it's such a perfect balance that if you disrupt one part of your brain, the other one redundantly compensates to continue to keep you alive. The purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. And this is one of the things about living, an incredible force that keeps us driving into this world, into it's the end of our life, into the physical body can no longer handle the brain. So what happens? For example, people ask me, let me ask you something, doctor. Why when I am in pain, physical pain, I am also depressed? A lot of it has to do with interconnected networks. It appears that when you give people antidepressants, it alleviates their pain. And when you give people pain medicine, it improves their depression. And this is the secret to the brain. So there is an interconnectedness with all systems. The systems that manage anxiety, the system that manages your thinking, the system that manages your cognition, like in dementia, the system that manages your ability to function when you're psychotic. Why are they all interconnected? This is when somebody has schizophrenia, they also can be very depressed. And this is why when somebody has also dementia, they can suffer from anxiety, because the brain is interconnected. Pharmaceutical products seem to be focusing, and they're developing better products to focus on specific parts of these networks. Like you have medications that have anti-anxiety properties, and when you control anxiety, yeah, well, guess what happens with depression? So my colleagues, this is why when you treat anxiety, you also are treating depression in an indirect way. You cannot separate the brain into these little boxes and these compartments that you're able to provide one treatment. It's all interconnected. I think that the secret drug one day will be when they can find a medication that deals with this network. So the secret here, if you can find a network that talks to each parts of the brain in such a way, you'll be able to find some kind of balance. For example, people who are blind The brain has to compensate to exist. So what does it do? Your senses become better. You hear better. You smell better. Your skin can sense certain things, almost to the point that if you talk to some blind people, they can project almost like their body that they cannot see. People who are deaf are very acute with their vision and watching the lips. So when you have a deficit, another example. An example how brain operates, autistic children and savants. Savants, in order to compensate for emotional issues, they develop their cognitive ability. So somewhere in the brain, that network that talks to each other compensates. So pharmaceutical companies, hear me, right? Maybe you'll find a way to figure out these networks better. Now, this is a very general theorem which I have evolved over the years. And basically, there's more detail which I have acquired and kept in some of my notes. But the premise is that when you touch one part of the brain, the other will be affected because there is an interconnection. So the brain operates on redundancy. Just like a computer, when you do a backup system, you try to figure out redundancy. So if the computer fails, your backup system fails. All that is interconnected. The subconscious mind, which we're not available to, we can access that through hypnosis. And let me tell you something. The brain is such a susceptible organism. For those who never heard of the word neuro-linguistic programming, and for those who have never heard of hypnosis, you can program the brain. We're constantly being programmed. The shows that we see, the movies that we watch, the things that people tell us. And yes, you may not be conscious of this, but we're always being either indirectly manipulated with information or subconsciously, not because of any intent, because that's the way the brain operates. The brain is a very perceptual organ that finds ways to survive. And I'm going to tell you this here, which I showed in some of my Instagram accounts. For those who follow me on Instagram, this is a good opportunity. Let me tell you an example, right? You know, there's a difference between fear and danger. So fear is a form of anxiety that triggers the brain to be careful of danger. Now, real danger is when you're walking towards a cliff and you're going to fall down. That's danger. That is real. That triggers an activating mechanism that causes your anxiety to go up, your muscles to tighten up and take care of yourself. But fear does not exist. You create fear. How many of you wake up in the morning and say, am I going to be fired? Or my God, my girlfriend's angry, or my boyfriend doesn't like this. It's almost like our brain is looking for ways to create fear. And these fear interfere in our ability to grow. And this is why all these metaphysical disciplines and all these forms of exercises train your brain to distract you from the fear. We create our own reality, and that fear creates anxiety. Now, I'm going to leave you with those thoughts, and that could be a topic of a separate program. What I wanted to talk to you today was about schizophrenia. Now, what does schizophrenia have to do with the brain's redundancy? Everything. Because for those who have lived with schizophrenic patients, one of the problems that they have is that they lose touch of reality. They can actually see people that are not there. They can actually say they can talk to the dead, or they hear voices. How does a schizophrenic hear voices? You ever ask them what are they hearing? If you do a little survey with schizophrenics, it's like a mechanical voice. It could be a humming, it could be a motor. Imagine waking up in the morning and all you hear, you're bad, a mechanical way, derogatory auditory hallucinations. Or they can see things that startle, and they can actually say, somebody's here. It's a very painful disease. Of all the diseases that we have, that is the most difficult to treat. I am not going to give you the neuropsychiatric premises of schizophrenia. I can show you 100 books. I'm just going to introduce you to concepts at the level of the layman, and as well as my colleagues, so they can hear how I perceive schizophrenia. You know, before the word schizophrenia ever existed, hundreds if not thousands of years ago, there were people who were called shamans or healers, or in Greece called the oracle. You know, if you take somebody in that time, they would claim that they would see the sun or they would hear spirits. If we were to bring them to this world right now, we probably label them schizophrenics. But did you know that in those times, they were holy and highly revered? The one thing about schizophrenia that we psychiatrists do not understand, that some of these schizophrenic have very highly perceptual abilities. And for those who live with them, they will surprise you with some things that they say. Sometimes their thinking is very derailed and disorganized. What medications try to do is to calm the storm. I think schizophrenia is the best evidence of a disease where basically the brain, the redundancy has failed. It's almost like every single circuit has been activated in schizophrenia. You know, there is a fine line between being a genius and being a schizophrenic. You probably saw the movie of a very famous mathematician that was recently in the movies about 5 or 6 years ago, where he was a mathematician genius. He went through this phase of being a genius, and then he became schizophrenic. So somehow, being schizophrenic, the redundancy network of your brain has gone unstable. If you talk to a genius, and people who are genius, they tap into information like Tesla. Ask Tesla. I mean, he's not around. I shouldn't say ask Tesla. You should see some of his movies and some of his books. He was such a genius, but some of the stuff he used to talk about surpassed the metaphysical. He touched on subjects that today we're kind of questioning. So there's a fine line between schizophrenia and a genius. Medications, unfortunately, have not been able to take care of all aspects of schizophrenia. We can give you a medicine that can get rid of your psychosis, but sometimes it will not take care of your depression. The first line treatments of medications when they first started, like haloperidol, and more importantly, clompromazine. Clompromazine was an accident by an anesthesiologist where he noticed that it tended to calm the anxiety and the agitation and some of the hallucinations of schizophrenia. If we can conquer and figure out how to treat schizophrenia, we have succeeded as psychiatrists in our mission, because it is the most difficult illness that will prevail. I have my theories as to how you can treat it, and I think there's a lot of good future research, not just medication, but non-medication areas. Like, for example, there's some research being done with transcranial magnetic stimulation. Fascinating, isn't it? Transcranial magnetic stimulation has been already shown to be proven effective with depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and OCD. We provide transcranial magnetic stimulation, and I'm doing a lot of work with patients that have depression and anxiety and also addictions. Just think of it. If this redundancy is totally impaired and we have a way of fixing it, either through medications, there are new medications that seem to be coming close to how we treat. Now, go back further. You know, in the 1970s, when I was yet to be trained as a psychiatrist, we used to hear in pharmacy school things that call psychosis. LSD. The LSD research of the 1960s made people extremely psychotic. When I became a resident in psychiatry, one of the things we used to see in the 90s is that people would come in, young kids, and they were very psychotic. And there are some substances that we know were inducing schizophrenia. I know that guys and patients that are taking marijuana, I'm not against anything in particular, but I can tell you this, all the research and all the good clinical trials they've done over in the 1980s have revealed that cannabis, certain forms of cannabis will induce schizophrenia, especially when you start at an early age. I have to tell you, I have seen patients in my practice who have taken it therapeutically, but slowly they have become schizophrenic. I know I'm not going to get a lot of positive attention. I will refer you to a book and a link down in my website called Mothers Please Tell Their Children. It's a thorough analysis of how marijuana has been associated with violence as well as schizophrenia. LSD, one of the things I'm kind of worried, and I've yet to see the research, it appears that using LSD, hallucinogenics, is back into the mainstream as a treatment of psychosis or a treatment to psychiatric disorders. I haven't seen the trials and the outcomes, but the substances that used to cause psychosis are now being introduced into our mainstream medication, which, again, I am not going to take sides. I can only tell you when I was in training the things that we used to see at the University of Texas Health Science Center. So when schizophrenics hear voices, they get anxious. In fact, when you have a schizophrenic that's very stable, guess what triggers a hallucination? Anxiety. So the mechanism that triggers anxiety induces hallucinations and hearing voices. And at the same time, when schizophrenics are very depressed, it induces more hallucinations. So this is my premise of how the networks are interconnected and how they impact one another. So, but I am here also to give you some hope. This is part one of this episode. In future episodes of this episode of schizophrenia, I'm going to share with you certain things that I've learned over the years and things that are coming to give hope to mothers and fathers. You know, the saddest things for families, and there are many books on this, is to know you have a child, you played with that child, very intelligent, and then suddenly a trigger, something in their brain at a certain age, usually about the age of 15 to 17, they're not the same. They become a different person. But I have to give you some hope. I have a goal and mission that I want to share with you. I came into psychiatry with one sole purpose. And it sounds a little bit grandiose, but not unrealistic. One of the nice things and fortunate things in my life that I'm involved in clinical trials. I am hoping that I can contribute in the finding of a cure for schizophrenia. You know, many things cause schizophrenia. We already know that using marijuana at a young age can cause schizophrenia. Mushrooms, the ones psychedelics that are used, can induce schizophrenia. We know that children that abuse certain drugs, which I will not say because it may promote the use, can cause schizophrenia. But the question is, why does the brain, with so much redundancy, how does it impair that suddenly all the redundancy goes malfunction? So, I hope that this first episode whets your appetite to keep coming back to this channel and hopefully inspire ideas and hope. Inspire ideas in pharmaceutical trials and my colleagues, and inspire hope to my patients that the treatment is coming and it's around the corner. I do not want you to lose hope, as the treatment for schizophrenia will soon be here. Very good drugs are now available. Combined the right way, you can alleviate the suffering. The good news is that the brain, if you find the right combination, just like the roots of a tree, finds a way to rewire itself so it can continue to live and survive.